The chill in the air wasn't from the grocery store's freezer section. It was the chill of being invisible, of being seen as less than. My daughter, Evelyn, always insisted on coming with me to the market. For your safety, mother, she'd say, you might fall. Or, so you don't forget anything important. She never just said, because I care. The words always had a barb, a subtle reminder of my supposed frailty. I used to love grocery shopping, the colors, the smells, the quiet hum of possibility, planning meals, nourishing my family. Now it felt like an inspection, a performance where I was the child, and Evelyn, the strict guardian. No, mother, you know you shouldn't have that. Her voice, sharp but hushed, pierced the aisle of prepackaged meals. I had reached for a small carton of ice cream, just a simple vanilla bean, a treat I hadn't enjoyed in months. My hand froze. My fingers, gnarled with age, still held the cold cardboard. I looked at the creamy swirl on the packaging, then at Evelyn. Her arms were crossed, her brow furrowed. The same look she'd given her son when he tried to sneak an extra cookie. The same look I remembered seeing on her face a decade ago, when she'd decided I wasn't up to date enough to manage my own finances, suggesting a joint account for my convenience. Just one, I murmured, my voice barely a whisper. I felt my cheeks flush. A 78-year-old woman asking permission for ice cream. In public, she sighed, a theatrical puff of air that seemed to echo through the entire dairy section. Mother, we've talked about this. Dr. Evans said your sugar levels. It's for your own good. We need to be vigilant. Vigilant. The word tasted bitter, as if I were a threat to myself, as if my life was a problem to be managed. I slowly, deliberately, placed the ice cream back in the freezer. The cold seeped into my fingertips. A small ache. But the ache in my chest was far deeper. It wasn't about the ice cream. It was about the control. The constant, suffocating micromanagement that had become the fabric of our relationship since my husband passed. She had started small, first rearranging my kitchen pantry, then suggesting I hire a cleaner, despite my perfectly capable hands, then deciding I shouldn't drive long distances anymore, effectively cutting off my weekly bridge club meetings across town. Each boundary she crossed was wrapped in the language of concern. For your well-being, mother. I just worry about you. But I saw it for what it was. A slow erosion of my autonomy. A quiet taking over of my life, piece by piece. We moved on to the produce section. Evelyn was meticulously inspecting organic kale. She held it up to the light, turning it as if searching for flaws in a diamond. My mind, however, was miles away, replaying her words, her tone, the public humiliation. It wasn't the first time. Oh, no. It had become a pattern, a cruel ritual. Last Christmas, she'd edited my guest list for dinner, claiming I'd forgotten to invite half the family, when in truth, I simply preferred a quieter holiday. She'd also helped me pick out a new dress for my granddaughter's graduation, then subtly steered me towards a more age-appropriate outfit, effectively telling me my first choice made me look ridiculous. And then there was the house. My house. The one my late husband Arthur and I had built together. The one she'd been hinting for years was too big for me. You should consider selling, mother. Downsizing. It would be so much less to manage. She never mentioned how much easier it would be for her to manage my affairs, or how much capital would be freed up. I pushed the grocery cart, its wheels squeaking a mournful tune. Evelyn was now debating the merits of different brands of almond milk. My thoughts drifted to Arthur. He would have never allowed this. He would have bought me a whole tub of ice cream just to spite her. He understood dignity. He understood respect. He also understood business. And that, I realized with a jolt, was something Evelyn had long forgotten. I understood too. My mind started to whir, a quiet engine of calculation behind the mask of an old woman. Evelyn, in her ambition, had started her own catering company a few years ago. Evelyn's Exquisite Eats, she called it, a rather grand name for a business that primarily supplied prepared meals to corporate offices and local events. She was proud of it, constantly talking about her growing network and strategic partnerships. One of her major partners, a key supplier of organic produce and specialty ingredients, was called Verdant Harvest. She mentioned them often. Verdant Harvest is absolutely vital to my operations, mother, she'd boast. Their quality, their reliability, it's unmatched. Without them, my business would crumble. A faint memory stirred. A conversation with Arthur, decades ago. A promising young agricultural startup he had invested in. A small seed of a company focused on sustainable farming. He'd poured a significant amount into it, believing in its long-term vision. He always said, "Invest in what feeds the world, my dear. It always pays off." I had never paid much attention to his business ventures. He handled all of that. But after he passed, his lawyer, Mr. Henderson, had walked me through all the portfolios, stocks, bonds, real estate, and a rather substantial equity stake in a company called Verdant Harvest. It was tucked away in a trust, part of Arthur's legacy, managed by a quiet investment firm. I had seen the quarterly statements, signed the necessary papers, but never really connected it to anything current in my life. It was just another asset. Until now. As Evelyn debated the ethical sourcing of her almond milk, a cold clarity washed over me. The incident with the ice cream, the countless other humiliations, the gradual erosion of my life. It wasn't just about ice cream. It was about her perception of me, a helpless, senile old woman, easily managed, easily dismissed. The indignity of that moment in the dairy aisle, her dismissive sigh, the feeling of my independence being chipped away, crystallized into something sharp and precise. I pushed the cart past her, a sudden surge of strength in my arms. "I'll get the bread," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil within. Evelyn, still engrossed in her almond milk dilemma, barely registered my words. "Fine, mother. Just make sure it's whole wheat, not that refined white stuff." I paused just for a second. The scent of fresh-baked goods wafted from the bakery section. White bread, whole wheat, such small things. Yet they represented everything. I walked towards the bread aisle, my gaze fixed not on the shelves, but inward. The memory of Mr. Henderson's precise voice. "A significant stake, Mrs. Davies, quite significant." Evelyn thought she was guiding my choices, dictating my plate, managing my life. What she didn't know was that I had a hand, a rather powerful hand, in what ended up on her plate, or more accurately, in what didn't end up on her clients' plates. My fingers, once trembling over a carton of ice cream, now felt firm, resolute. This wasn't about anger. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reminding someone of the cost of disrespect, of the value of dignity, of the quiet power of an overlooked elder. I picked up a loaf of whole wheat bread, as she'd instructed. But as I placed it in the cart, my mind was already several steps ahead. It was already mapping out a different kind of supply chain, one that Evelyn had taken for granted, one that, very soon, she might find herself unexpectedly cut off from. The grocery store buzzed with mundane life, shoppers, carts, cashiers. For them, it was just another Tuesday. For me, it was the day the scales tipped, the day the quiet war for my dignity began. Evelyn had made her choice in the dairy aisle. Now it was time for me to make mine, and mine would involve more than just a scoop of vanilla. I walked out of the store, the afternoon sun warm on my face, but a chill of anticipation in my heart. Evelyn was still prattling about organic certification in the car on the way home. I nodded occasionally, feigning attentiveness. Inside, a quiet storm was brewing. I knew what I had to do. The first call would be to Mr. Henderson. It was time to dust off those old trust documents. The car ride home was silent, a suffocating, heavy silence. My daughter Sarah hummed softly to herself, oblivious, or perhaps deliberately so. She had her groceries, I had mine, but the weight of her words, the cold shame of them, clung to me like a shroud. You really shouldn't be eating that, mother, she'd said. Her voice, sweet and patronizing, cut through the bustling aisle. It's full of sugar, full of bad fats. You know what Dr. Davies said. I remember the stares, the quick glances from other shoppers, the way my hand trembled, holding that innocent package of shortbread cookies. A small pleasure, a tiny rebellion, instantly crushed. It wasn't just about the cookies. It never was. It was about control, about ownership, about shrinking my world piece by piece until I was just a docile figure in her carefully curated life. A life where I was a burden, to be managed, to be told. The condescension had started subtly, years ago, a gentle suggestion about my clutter in the house. Then a firmer hand, moving my furniture, rearranging my kitchen, as if my home, the sanctuary I had built with my own hands, was no longer truly mine. Mother, darling, have you thought about downsizing? She'd asked one Sunday lunch. Her fork paused mid-air, a perfect piece of roast chicken impaled upon it. This house is simply too much for you, all those stairs, all that upkeep. I loved my house. Every creaking floorboard, every sun-drenched window. It held the echoes of a lifetime, of laughter, of tears, of triumph. It was where I raised her, where I poured every ounce of my love and effort, and she wanted to shrink it, to pack away my memories into boxes, out of sight, out of mind. Then came the help, well-meaning. She insisted, but it felt more like surveillance, a parade of cleaners, gardeners, carers, all subtly reporting back to Sarah. My independence chipped away, brick by brick, every decision scrutinized, every desire deemed unnecessary or unhealthy. Christmas last year, I'd spent days baking my famous fruit cake, a recipe passed down from my grandmother, a tradition, a labor of love. Sarah took one look, offered a strained smile, and said, "Oh, mother, how retro. We're doing gluten-free this year, and sugar-free, for the children, you know." My fruitcake sat untouched, a monument to my irrelevance, while her organic, kale-infused, sugar-free monstrosities were devoured with forced enthusiasm. I felt like a ghost at my own family table, invisible, my efforts dismissed, my very presence an inconvenience. The loneliness was a constant companion, a dull ache in my chest. Even when surrounded by family, I was alone. They spoke over me. They spoke for me. They made plans without consulting me. My voice, once strong and resonant, had become a whisper, barely heard, never heeded. I remembered the days, the endless nights, working, building, forging a path in a world that wasn't designed for women like me. I built my empire, not with grand gestures, but with quiet determination, with an unwavering belief in my own worth, in my own capabilities. My husband, bless his soul, had always supported me, but even he underestimated my quiet power, the depth of my resilience, the intricate web of connections I had painstakingly woven over decades. In the background, always underestimated, always overlooked, Sarah saw me as a relic, a sweet, frail old woman whose greatest achievement was raising her. She never truly understood the woman who built a business from scratch, the woman who navigated boardrooms and supply chains with a steel resolve, the woman who commanded respect, not through shouting, but through quiet authority. She saw me as a purse string, a source of future inheritance. Her casual remarks about when the house sells or when you finally get around to updating your will were like tiny daggers, each one twisting a little deeper. But the grocery store, that was different. That was public. That was a raw, undeniable humiliation. To be treated like a child, to be told what I could eat, as if my palate, my choices, my very autonomy belonged to her. Something shifted in me then, a quiet, almost imperceptible click. The loneliness didn't disappear. The ache remained, but beneath it, a spark ignited, a familiar ember from long ago, the fire of the woman who built an empire, the woman who refused to be told she couldn't. I looked at Sarah in the rearview mirror, her profile, illuminated by the fading afternoon light, so self assured, so confident in her control, in her perceived power. She had no idea what she had unleashed. My hands, gnarled with age and work, tightened on the armrests. I felt the familiar hum of something awakening within me, a strategic mind, a calculating spirit. It had lain dormant for too long, lulled by the illusion of peace, the desire for family harmony. But peace at what cost? Harmony bought with my dignity? No, not anymore. I closed my eyes for a moment. Not in defeat, but in careful consideration. The gears were turning. The landscape of my life suddenly appearing in a new light. The connections, the influence, the vast, intricate network I had painstakingly built, brick by brick over 50 years. Sarah's company, her successful, thriving food distribution empire, the one she managed with such pride, such arrogance. She spoke of its complexity, its global reach, its dependence on a robust, reliable supply chain, and who, she wondered, was one of its most robust, most reliable suppliers, who had, for decades, provided the raw materials that formed the very bedrock of her enterprise? She didn't know. She hadn't bothered to ask. She had just assumed I was a doddering old woman, concerned only with my next cup of tea and the evening news. A small smile, thin and almost imperceptible, touched my lips. The silence in the car was no longer suffocating. It was pregnant with possibility, with a quiet gathering storm. The game had changed, and Sarah had just made the first fatal move. I opened my eyes. The landscape outside blurred past, but my vision had never been clearer. It was time to remind her who I was, and more importantly, who I still am. The shortbread cookies, still in their bag, sat on the passenger seat. My small, denied pleasure. Soon, I thought, soon she would learn the true cost of denying an elder her dignity, the true cost of underestimating a woman who had, long ago, learned to forge her own path, to build her own world, and to dismantle another's if need be. My phone, a simple flip phone, rested in my pocket. I hadn't touched it in days, not since Sarah had started dictating my screen time. But there was a number I remembered, a number I hadn't called in years, a direct line to an old friend, a man who still owed me a favor, a very big favor. Tomorrow, tomorrow, I would make that call. The grocery store incident lingered. Sarah's words, what I could eat, echoed in my mind for days. They weren't just a suggestion, they were a command, delivered with that saccharine smile she reserved for those she deemed incapable. My hands, frail but steady, trembled as I loaded the approved items into the cart. The shame burned, hotter than any chili pepper I was now forbidden to touch. It wasn't about my health. Not truly. It was about her power, my humiliation, a tightening coil in my gut, familiar and unwelcome, a feeling I'd learned to suppress over decades. My home, the house Thomas and I had built, used to be my sanctuary, a quiet space filled with a lifetime of memories, my rhythm, my peace. Now, Sarah's visits felt like invasions, inspections. She would sweep into the kitchen, a whirlwind of judgment, a fragrant cloud of expensive perfume, open the fridge door, gaze in with a dramatic sigh. Mom, you really shouldn't have this. All that saturated fat. And so much sugar. Remember what Dr. Miller said about your cholesterol? She'd point a perfectly manicured finger at the small carton of artisan ice cream, a rare, solitary indulgence, or the hearty leftover stew I'd lovingly simmered, a recipe from my own mother. You know, Dr. Miller thinks we should be more mindful, especially at our age. Dr. Miller, her discovery, a new doctor, young, brisk, full of modern pronouncements. He nodded along to all Sarah's health theories, never quite looking me in the eye. He'd look at me instead, with a polite, detached concern, as if I were a child, a patient child, ready to swallow whatever bitter pill Sarah prescribed. Her gentle coercion. I remembered building this life, every brick laid, every choice weighed. My husband, Thomas, his steady hand, his quiet strength, our small grocery business, born from nothing but sheer will and hard work. How we worked, side by side, from dawn till dusk, our hands calloused, our minds sharp. We scrimped, we saved, we invested, not just in stocks and bonds, the safe, predictable paths. Thomas had a different eye, a visionary's instinct. He saw potential in the small, the overlooked. In suppliers, small, struggling farms, local dairies fighting against the big conglomerates, humble canning operations, powered by a handful of dedicated people, companies that provided the very ingredients for Sarah's sprawling, ethical, organic food chain. The irony of it all was a bitter metallic taste in my mouth, a taste I refused to ignore any longer. One such investment stood out like a beacon in my memory, a glint of gold in a pile of dusty receipts. Verdant Harvest, a tiny canning operation back then, barely making ends meet, struggling to get their quality produce into stores. Thomas had seen their ambition, their commitment to fresh, honest ingredients, their quiet integrity. We'd put a good chunk of our savings into it. It was a risk, a monumental one for us then. Our neighbors thought we were mad, but we believed in them. Decades later, that small operation had blossomed. It had become enormous, a global juggernaut, a cornerstone supplier for many major chains, its name synonymous with quality and reliability. Sarah's pride and joy, pure and pristine, was one of them. A prime client. I had kept my shares, hidden away, mostly forgotten, tucked deep within a safety deposit box, a relic of a past life. Until now, until Sarah's suffocating care. The control escalated. It moved beyond my diet, beyond my pantry. Sarah started talking about my car, my little sedan, a sensible beige, my last link to true independence, my freedom machine. Mom, maybe it's time we think about selling it. You hardly drive anymore, and it's such an expense. The insurance alone. We could just arrange rides for you, darling. My assistant could set it all up, easier for everyone. Rides. As if I were a packet to be delivered, a fragile parcel needing constant supervision. I would nod, smile weakly, a practiced reflex, honed over years of her quiet encroachment. But inside, a steel resolve hardened. A quiet anger, cold and sharp, began to hum beneath my skin. Then came the discussions about my affairs, my finances, my will. Just to make sure everything's in order, Mom, for your peace of mind. Her words dripped with faint concern, a sugar coating over a bitter pill. Peace of mind or peace of Sarah's mind, knowing every penny was accounted for, neatly catalogued, perhaps even pre-allocated for her convenience? I felt the walls closing in, the suffocating blanket of Sarah's care. It felt less like care and more like a gentle, creeping suffocation, a deliberate erasure of who I was. The indignity of it all finally stirred something deep within me. A fire, long dormant, began to flicker. I began my own quiet research. Late one evening, after Sarah's latest inspection and suggestion, I slipped up to the attic. The air was thick with the scent of old paper and forgotten dust. Dust motes danced in the weak beam of my flashlight, like tiny ethereal dancers. Old photographs of Thomas, his laugh lines etched around his eyes, his arm around me, childish drawings, long forgotten, and then tucked away in a sturdy leather box beneath a pile of old linens, financial ledgers, share certificates, a lifetime of prudence, of hard work. And there it was, the Verdant Harvest Papers, a significant holding, far more substantial than I had remembered, or perhaps allowed myself to acknowledge, more than Sarah, in her wildest dreams, could ever comprehend. I traced the faded, elegant signature. Thomas's. My name was there too. Our legacy, our shared foresight. The next Sunday lunch, Sarah arrived, beaming, an almost triumphant air about her. In her hands, not flowers, but a sleek, insulated bag. Inside, a pre-portioned meal. Low sodium, low fat, Mom. Just for you. It was bland, unappetizing, a beige landscape on a plate, devoid of flavor, of joy. I looked at it, then at Sarah's own vibrant, colorful salad, brimming with fresh produce and gourmet dressing. She ate with gusto, oblivious to the quiet storm brewing within me. She talked about an upcoming executive meeting at Pure and Pristine, how crucial reliable suppliers were, how they were branching out, consolidating their market share. Her voice, confident and self-assured, grated on my nerves. I just listened. My mind was elsewhere, with those precious papers in the attic, with Verdant Harvest, a name that now hummed with a different kind of power. I remembered Sarah once, during a particularly trying Christmas dinner years ago, dismissing my past life. Mom, you just don't understand business these days. It's all high-tech, fast-paced. Not like your old-fashioned grocery store. The market has changed. Her tone had been light but condescending, patronizing, as if my life's work, my decades of shrewd decisions, were quaint, irrelevant, a relic. I smiled then, a small secret smile that didn't reach my eyes. Oh, but I did understand, better than Sarah knew. My understanding was deep, rooted in experience, and very, very patient. That evening, the attic visit propelled me forward with a quiet urgency. I carefully pulled out my old laptop. It was slow, clunky. The fan whirred loudly, protesting its sudden activation after so long. The screen flickered to life. My fingers, stiff with age but steady with purpose, typed Verdant Harvest. The search results flooded the screen. A massive corporation, global reach, impressive. Its history, its growth, its current market value. Then I typed Pure and Pristine Suppliers. Verdant Harvest was listed, prominently, a primary supplier, a critical link in Sarah's perfectly curated organic empire, the very bedrock of her success. A cold, deliberate clarity settled over me, sharp and undeniable. Sarah wanted to control my life, my choices, my very breath. She wanted to dictate what I could eat, where I could go, how I could live, to infantilize me, to reduce me to a burden, a project, to manage my affairs. But I held a different kind of power. A power Sarah didn't even know existed. A power rooted in the very earth that grew the food Sarah sold. A power she had dismissed as old-fashioned. The thought grew, a quiet, insistent hum in my bones. It wasn't about revenge, not in the petty sense. Not exactly. It was about dignity, about respect, about showing Sarah what real control looked like, and what it felt like to have the rug pulled out from under you, to be cut off from your lifeline, just as she had so casually, so cruelly cut me off from mine. I closed the laptop. The fan whined into silence. The screen went dark, reflecting my own resolute face. I looked out the window at the twilight sky, painting the world in bruised purples and fading oranges. The game was about to change. I just needed to be sure. To be very, very sure. The next step was crucial. It would require a deep dive into the legalities, a confirmation of my position, an ironclad plan. And then I drew a deep breath, the taste of freedom, a faint, sweet whisper on my tongue, a promise of justice. The phone call started subtly changing. At first, it was just a shift in tone, a little more frantic, a little less polished. Then the content began to unravel. "Mom, you won't believe the nightmare at work," she'd groan, her voice tight, strained, utterly devoid of the usual self-assuredness. "Another shipment is delayed from Northwood Foods. Again, it's becoming a pattern. Northwood Foods. My company." The words hummed a low, satisfied note in my chest. A quiet, steady beat. I would just listen, offering soothing, non-committal murmurs. Oh dear, how inconvenient. She didn't suspect, not for a second. To her, I was just Mom, the one who worried about her cholesterol, not market shares. They're giving us some ridiculous story about unforeseen logistical challenges. She fumed on another call. A few days later, her voice had an edge of panic now. "Logistical challenges. Our specialty aisles are empty, Mom. Completely bare. Do you have any idea what this does to our client relationships? To our reputation for consistent supply?" I knew. Oh, how I knew. Every crate that wasn't delivered. Every truck that remained idle. Every empty shelf where her premium organic produce should have been. It was all a thread, a precise, deliberate unraveling. The fabric of her carefully constructed empire, slowly, meticulously coming apart. I remembered her hand, pushing away the artisan sourdough from my cart. "Too many carbs, Mom. You really shouldn't. It's bad for your digestion." I remembered the condescending glance as she swapped my whole milk for skim. "It's for your own good, Mom. We don't want any health scares." The sting of her words. The public shaming in the bright, unforgiving lights of the grocery store. My choices. My very autonomy, stripped away by her unwavering certainty. Now, her choices, or rather, the consequences of her lack of foresight, were dictating her fate. "We've just lost the entire Peterson account, Mom," she sobbed one evening. The kind of raw, desperate sob that only comes when one's world truly crumbles. "Peterson, because we couldn't deliver the specialty items for their new winter range. The organic cheeses, the gluten-free grains, all sourced exclusively from Northwood. We're talking about a multi-million-dollar contract. Gone." A cold, hard satisfaction settled deep inside me. The Peterson account. Those specialty cheeses. I recalled her scoff. "Mom, you don't need that expensive French brie. It's just dairy. Stick to the basics. Be sensible." Sensible. "It's like Northwood Foods is actively sabotaging us," she continued, her voice rising in pitch. "Everything we need, everything critical to our high-end image. It's always Northwood. They're either incompetent or they're going out of business. Have you heard anything, Mom?" You have friends everywhere. You must know something about their financial state. I paused, long enough for the silence to press in on her end of the line, for her to imagine me, an old woman, perhaps leafing through a newspaper. I haven't heard anything specific about their financial health, dear, I replied, my voice as calm and steady as a mountain lake. The market can be quite volatile sometimes, especially for niche suppliers trying to scale up. A perfect half-truth. Northwood wasn't niche anymore. Not truly. And it was scaling, yes, just not in the way she imagined. She didn't suspect. How could she? I was just her mother, the one who needed guidance, the one whose life she felt entitled to manage, the one whose intelligence she consistently underestimated. A few days later, a thick envelope arrived at my door from her company's legal department. Not for me, of course, but for her, accidentally sent to my old address, which was still on some family contact lists, an internal memo, all about the escalating crisis, the critical supply chain disruption, the unprecedented challenges from key vendors, all meticulously documented, all pointing to Northwood Foods. She was clearly panicking. The stress was eating at her. Her frantic emails to me, normally terse and functional, became long, rambling streams of anxiety. She even stopped by one afternoon, unannounced, her expensive coat wrinkled, her face pale, eyes bloodshot, framed by dark circles. "Mom, I truly don't know what to do," she confessed, slumping onto my antique velvet sofa, the very one she had once declared terribly outdated. She looked around my immaculate, well-stocked pantry, visible from the living room. "You always have everything, Mom. Where do you get it? Do you ever have trouble getting your regular brands? I swear, sometimes I can't even find a simple carton of organic oat milk at our store. My regular brands, many of them, ironically, sourced through Northwood's own direct-to-consumer division or via their network of smaller, independent grocers." I just offered her a gentle smile. "I have my ways, dear, and I've always believed in planning ahead. A well-stocked pantry is a prepared mind. Wouldn't you agree?" She sighed, running a trembling hand through her perfectly styled hair, now slightly disheveled. "We are seriously considering pulling out of the Northwood contract entirely," mumbled, almost to herself, her eyes distant, fixed on some unseen point of disaster. "If we can, they're costing us a fortune. Legal fees mounting. Lost clients. It's a complete disaster. Our board is furious." Pulling out of the contract. Yes, that was the next logical step. The next inevitable domino. It would be a catastrophic decision for her company, even if she couldn't see it now. Severing ties with what was, unbeknownst to her, a major, increasingly powerful supplier, the only supplier capable of handling her volume for those very specific high-demand, high-margin premium products she had staked her company's reputation on. She was digging her own grave, and she didn't even see the shovel resting so calmly in my hands. I watched her pace my living room, a ghost of her former, imperious self, her elegant suite, now a testament to her distress, her confident stride, replaced by a restless, aimless wandering. Desperation was a palpable aura around her. She started listing the products she was losing: the high-end triple cream organic cheeses, the ancient grain pastas, the artisanal gluten-free baked goods, all the items she had so casually dismissed from my grocery cart, the unnecessary ones, the bad-for-you ones, the very products her company relied upon for its prestige and profit. The irony of it all was a bitter taste in my mouth, yes, but also a profoundly satisfying one, a long-awaited dessert. "It's a nightmare, Mom. A pure nightmare," she reiterated, her voice breaking. "We're going to have to make major cuts. Departments will shrink. Layoffs, possibly. I don't know how I'll face everyone." Layoffs. people losing their livelihoods, a ripple effect. My stomach gave a small, almost imperceptible clench, a flicker of doubt. Was this truly fair? Was this going too far? Then the vivid memory resurfaced, her sneering face looming over my cart. "You're too old for that, Mom. You need to be careful. Be sensible. You don't want to end up a burden, do you?" I remembered the pity in her eyes, mixed with thinly veiled contempt, the dismissive wave of her perfectly manicured hand, the crushing feeling of being made to feel small, irrelevant, a child. My decades of work, my contributions to her life, to her early ventures, all erased, dismissed, forgotten. No, this was not too far. This was justice. This was the precise, carefully measured price of a lesson she had stubbornly refused to learn through kindness, through patience, through simple respect. She picked up a framed photograph from my mantelpiece, a picture of us from 20 years ago, before the entitlement, before the control, before the icy distance. She traced my younger face with her finger, a wistful, almost melancholic gesture. "I just wish I knew what was truly going on with Northwood," she whispered, almost to herself, her voice raw with bewildered anguish. "They used to be such a rock for us, so reliable, always there, a foundation we could build everything on, like a rock. Yes, I was still there, still her rock, just a different kind of rock now, one that could, with quiet precision, crumble an empire." She left later that evening, her shoulders slumped, her usual vibrant energy completely drained, still stressed, still frantic, still utterly oblivious to the true architect of her woes, her problems, a growing, suffocating mountain on her slender shoulders. My secret, a quiet, formidable power, a weapon she never knew I possessed. The air in my home felt different after she departed, lighter, perhaps, with the weight of her distress removed, or heavier, with the lingering scent of her desperation. The game was indeed progressing. The pieces were moving with an almost elegant inevitability. And the final act, the ultimate undeniable reveal, was drawing near. I sat in my favorite armchair, watching the streetlights flicker on across the quiet street, each one a tiny beacon in the gathering gloom, waiting. My patience was not merely a virtue, it was a well-worn, sharpened tool. It had served me faithfully for decades, through every slight, every dismissal, every moment of her growing disrespect. It would serve me now, to the very, very end. The quiet hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in my kitchen. The phone felt heavy in my hand after I hung up with Mr. Henderson. My instructions had been clear, concise, unwavering. He hadn't questioned a single word. He was a professional, a man who understood the intricate dance of supply and demand, and the delicate balance of trust that held it all together. He also knew my history with that company, my stake, my unwavering commitment to its foundational principles. A strange calm settled over me. It wasn't triumph, not exactly, more like a deep, bone-weary release. The tension that had coiled in my stomach since the grocery store, since years before that, had finally begun to unfurl. The words Sarah had uttered, sharp as shards of glass, echoed in the stillness. "You could eat that, Mother, if you wanted to be even sicker." The condescension, the casual cruelty. It had been the final straw. The weight of her control, her dismissive gaze, her constant attempts to shrink my world, to diminish me. My finger traced the rim of my tea mug. I thought of the countless Sundays, the family dinners where my opinions were brushed aside, my wisdom, earned through decades, treated as quaint rambling, the times I'd offered advice for her struggling company, only to be met with a patronizing pat on the hand. "Oh, Mother, you wouldn't understand the modern market. And now, the market was about to understand me. The next morning, the silence was almost deafening. No frantic calls from Sarah. Not yet. I knew it wouldn't be immediate. Supply chains, like slow moving rivers, take time to reroute, to dry up. But the current had been diverted. The flow was already changing course. I spent the day tending to my garden. Each weed I pulled felt like a small act of defiance. Each rose I pruned, a careful shaping of my own destiny. The sun was warm on my skin. I felt a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years, a clarity that cut through the fog of resentment and resignation. This wasn't about revenge, I told myself. It was about respect, about boundaries, about asserting my right to simply be, to make my own choices, to exist without permission. The first ripple came late that afternoon. A terse text message from Sarah. Having an issue with the delivery? What's wrong with Henderson? Just that. No. Hello. No. How are you? Straight to the problem. Her problem. I didn't reply. I simply placed my phone face down on the polished oak table, letting the notification fade into the background. I pictured her in her pristine office, her carefully arranged desk, her expensive suit, the veneer of control beginning to crack. A small, almost imperceptible tremor in the edifice she had built, partly on my silent backing. The next day, the texts became more frequent, more agitated. Mother, Mr. Henderson's company is delaying our order. They're saying there are complications. Do you know anything about this? Then, Mother, this is becoming a serious problem. Our production line is slowing. Finally, a frantic string of exclamation marks. Mother, call me. This is urgent. We're facing a crisis. I watched the screen, unmoving. The words were just pixels, distant, abstract. I remembered the way her eyes had narrowed at the grocery store, the way she'd snatched the carton of my favorite ice cream from my hand, placing it back on the shelf with a sigh of exaggerated martyrdom. Honestly, Mother, at your age, you should know better. My age. The very age that had built the foundation for her supposed success. The phone rang. I saw Sarah's name flash. It rang again and again. I let it ring. The sound was not an intrusion. It was a distant echo of a world I had, for too long, allowed to dictate my peace. I thought of the quiet dignity I yearned for, the simple autonomy that had been stripped away, little by the people who claimed to love me. The weekend brought more turmoil for Sarah. I gathered from the silence. No calls, no texts, just the heavy absence of her usual self-assured pronouncements. I knew she was scrambling, trying to find alternative suppliers, facing the harsh reality of her company's vulnerability. Mr. Henderson's company wasn't just a supplier, it was the supplier for certain crucial ingredients, secured through years of my own diligent networking and financial support, my trust, my investment. Monday morning arrived with a new intensity. My phone buzzed persistently. It wasn't just Sarah now. It was my son-in-law, Mark, then my grandson, David, usually so sweet and respectful. Their messages were less accusatory, more desperate. Grandma, Sarah's really stressed. Her company is having major problems. Is there anything you can do? Anything I can do? The words tasted like ash. I had already done so much, too much perhaps. I had built the bridges, laid the groundwork, provided the quiet capital. And what had it bought me? A lecture in a grocery aisle, a life dictated by the whims of my own child. I finally picked up the phone when Sarah called again, her voice hoarse, ragged. Mother, she choked out, the entire order has been cancelled. Henderson just informed us. They said they can no longer fulfill our contracts. They cited a review of long-standing agreements. What did you do? Her voice was raw with panic. The carefully constructed facade had crumbled. The cracks were showing, wide and deep. I took a slow, deliberate breath. What did I do, Sarah? My voice was calm, steady, a stark contrast to her own. I simply made a few phone calls, spoke to a few old friends, friends who respect my decisions, friends who know the value of loyalty. There was a stunned silence on the other end. I could almost hear the gears turning in her mind, the sudden, horrifying realization dawning, the connection between my silent ownership, my long forgotten influence, and the immediate devastating blow to her business. You, you own part of Henderson's, don't you? Her voice was barely a whisper. The question was laced with disbelief, a desperate attempt to grasp at a reality she had so carelessly ignored for years. Significant ownership, darling, I replied, a cool politeness in my tone that I knew would cut deeper than any shout. And significant influence, an influence I chose to exert. But why? The question hung in the air, heavy with accusation, yet tinged with a flicker of dawning fear. Why would you do this? You're destroying my company, our family's future. Our family's future. The phrase felt hollow. Had she considered my future, my dignity, my peace? When she'd stood over me in the grocery store, dictating my dinner, had she thought of the years I'd sacrificed? The late nights, the quiet struggle, the dreams I'd put aside so my children could have more? You asked me what I could eat, Sarah, I said, my voice unwavering. You told me what choices I was allowed to make. You treated me like a child, a burden. You forgot who I was and what I built. Another silence, this one longer, more profound. It was the silence of a truth finally, brutally revealed. The silence of a child who had taken too much for granted, only to find the well was not inexhaustible. Mother, please, she pleaded, her voice breaking. We can fix this. I can fix this. Just tell them to reverse it, please. Reverse what, Sarah? I asked, feigning innocence. The consequences of your own actions? The disrespect you've shown? The years of quiet diminishment? Some things, once broken, cannot simply be put back together with a plea. I felt no joy in her suffering, not truly, only a profound sadness for what we had become, for the chasm that had opened between us. But beneath that sadness, a hard, unyielding core of resolve remained. This was necessary, not for retribution, but for reclamation, the reclamation of myself. This is not a negotiation, Sarah, I continued, my voice firm. This is a consequence. Perhaps, in time, you will understand the difference between being a parent and being a dictator, between providing support and demanding subservience. I heard a strangled sob on her end. My heart ached, a dull, familiar throb. But I pushed past it. The ache was old. Her pain was new. Perhaps this was the only way she would ever truly learn. I need to go now, Sarah, I said, my voice softening just a fraction, a concession to the mother within me. I have my own choices to make for dinner, and this time they will be my own. I hung up. The quiet returned. But it was a different quiet now, a quiet laced with the echo of shattered illusions and the faint whisper of a dawning reckoning. Sarah's world was in turmoil. Her company teetered on the brink, and I, the old woman she had dismissed, the one she had tried to control, stood at the center of it all. My tea was still warm. The garden outside blooming in the soft evening light. The game had truly begun. And the next move, well, that remained to be seen.